I thank you, and I now yield to the ranking member, Mr. McCaul, for his opening remarks.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank you for your kind words. Just so the members know, we did attempt to engage in good faith negotiations on this, and while some of what's in this bill is very good, we got to a point where we just have to agree to disagree. But we always do so with civility and respect, and I think that's been the historic tradition of this committee, and I know the chairman and I are committed to carrying that tradition forward. Just yesterday we passed a slate of bipartisan bills, and we passed probably more than any committee in this Congress already that have been bipartisan. And so I want to thank you for that as well, and your friendship. And so moving forward, we will have a spirited debate, but that's what the Congress is all about. And we don't always agree on everything. And so I think this will be, I hope, a very civil discourse and respectful debate on something that really is of paramount importance, and that is how our foreign policy when it comes to communist Chinese government. I want to start out by just saying, my father's generation fought in World War II. I grew up in the Cold War, as did the chairman. My children lived through 9/11, as did most in this room. But I think the greatest challenge for this generation is the Chinese Communist Party. Not the Chinese people, but the Chinese Communist Party. And it's a generational struggle. A serious approach to China threat needs to be coordinated across committees of jurisdiction, just like we did when I chaired the China Task Force. Our task force was the result of 6 months of work between 11 committees of jurisdiction. It involved 60 engagements with 130 Republicans, Democrats, and nonpartisan leaders. And the final product had more than 400 recommendations, and of those legislative recommendations, well over half were bipartisan. Recent Pew polling finds roughly 9 in 10 U.S. adults consider the PRC a competitor or an enemy. In other words, confronting the China problem, the China challenge, is not a Republican issue or a Democrat issue. It is an American issue, which is why we should be here today talking about a bipartisan comprehensive bill to confront the challenge posed by the CCP. Instead, I believe the bill we are marking up today was crafted primarily, if not solely, by the majority with little input from committee Republicans. And Republican requests to improve the bill ahead of today's markup were not really given any meaningful consideration. This committee has had a long history of working in a bipartisan manner, as I stated, to address some of the most complicated issues facing the world. So it is regrettable and disappointing that at least today that tradition, perhaps we will carry that forward, but we will have this debate. The Eagle Act, and I respect the views of the chairman on this bill. I know he's put a lot of work into it, but I don't believe it's a strong bill. I believe it's more of a messaging bill that is a Trojan horse for flawed green climate initiatives. More than $10 billion are dedicated to green energy and other climate change-related projects in this bill. $8 billion of that goes to a UN slush fund called the Green Climate Fund. The majority says it wants the United States to lead on climate change. And many of us on this side of the aisle agree with that. But under this proposal, the United States would outsource that leadership to this unaccountable UN agency that we have virtually no control over. And what's worse is that some of these initiatives may actually end up helping the CCP while harming U.S. foreign policy interests. The Green Climate Fund has already cut a $100 million check to the CCP to finance climate programs it should be paying for. That will likely happen again if this bill is passed. In other words, some of this money provided by the American taxpayer could end up going directly into the CCP's coffers. Moreover, nothing would prevent the Green Climate Fund from paying for solar panels made in China in the Xinjiang province under the slave labor. And even though forced labor has tainted the PRC's solar panel supply chain, as Secretary Kerry admitted to this committee just a month and a half ago to me, even without the serious concerns I have on the climate provisions, the remainder of this bill is underwhelming. Despite being more than 600 pages, this bill offers few new ideas and little substantive actions to reorient our government in this strategic competition. Instead, it is filled with findings, reports, and non-binding senses of Congress. It claims to impose costs on the CCP for human rights abuses, but it does so by recycling bills that we've already passed out of our committee and some that have already passed the House. It claims to strengthen American economic diplomacy, but it offers no solutions to the CCP's unfair trade practices and illegal behavior. That includes CCP-controlled companies violating our stock market listing rules. But what's more striking is not what's in it, but what's missing. One of the strongest authorities this committee has across multiple federal agencies is the Export Control Act. Export controls, which are this committee's most powerful tools to slow down the CCP military and prevent human rights abuses, is only mentioned 3 times in the 600 pages. Now, none of these times one of these times it's just a definition. So this bill deliberately excludes a Senate provision to increase scrutiny on CCP companies that violate our stock market regulations. With an ongoing genocide and a military-driven economy system, now is not the time to put industry profits ahead of our values and our security. And this bill is so far away from the comprehensive and bipartisan approach the Senate took. When the Senate Foreign Relations Committee passed a very bipartisan package, one Democrat bill for one Republican, that is not this bill. I was hopeful we could take a lot of what the Senate did, and some of it's in here, but we are nowhere near a place where our 2 chambers can get to a conference report the president could sign. So I urge my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to heed President Biden's CIA director's words about China itself. When the director said, quote, "It is hard for me to see a more significant threat or challenge for the United States as far out as I can see into the 21st century than this one. It is the biggest geopolitical test that we face." And I couldn't agree more. So, Mr. Chairman, I know we disagree on this, but respectfully, and I'm hopeful in the future we can work together to treat the Chinese Communist Party as the most significant national security threat to the United States as it truly is. And with that, I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. McCaul.